My name is Pippa. I'm here from IBK Initiatives and the Centre for Welfare Reform. And I'm here this morning to talk about some work that I've been doing with the Centre, with Simon Duffy from the Centre for Welfare Reform in Sheffield, with families in Sheffield. Just to tell you a little bit about myself so you know that where I'm coming from, IBK stands for Inspired by Kim. Kim was my son, who had very complex impairments and who sadly I lost at the age of 15. He was nearly 16. And that was nearly 15 years ago. It seems like past life now, unfortunately. But we were just about to embark on this strange time called transition. And the first thing I want to say is that what does transition mean? What is this word called transition? For families, for young people and families, this is just about growing up, leaving school and moving into adult life, whether that's going to college, whether it's looking for employment, whatever it means. It's for families, transition doesn't really make any sense at all. It's a word about services that has come from service land, and it's about processes. But it's really, really important, and listening to Billy and listening to Norma talking about the voices of young people, this is about people's lives. That's all it's about. And we're all involved as human beings trying to make this better for people. I'm assuming that all you good people here today, that's what you're about. You're wanting to make it better for people. So one of the things behind this piece of work was trying to put the barriers down and to get people to relate to each other as human beings, one to another. Before we started this work in Sheffield, the end of June, July was a bit like the Third World War. It was a time full of anxiety, anger, frustration. When young people were leaving school, emails started flying around from families to social care. Social care would then throw those families onto throw those emails onto health. Health might then throw them back to education, back to the families. At the bottom of it, there was a great deal of anxiety, frustration and anger from families, with young people sat at home with nothing to do, or not what they want to do. So we wanted to stop this situation. Simon and I at that time were both governors at a special school in Sheffield. So this work was really led by governors, by parent governors, and Simon and I were both community governors. And we didn't know personalised transition, that wasn't a word then. We were just in there trying to make things better for the students that would be leaving school the next year. But as time has gone on, we're now in year 5 of this work, and I'll tell you a bit about, it's not perfect, and I don't want to give you that impression that it is perfect. There are families still struggling, there are young people still not getting what they deserve and the lives that they deserve, but it is hugely better. And we have managed to change the culture of the school in this respect. At the beginning, the school was saying, what's this got to do with us? You know, we have these kids until they're 19. In England, if you've got a statement, you're in school till you're 19, but after that, it's got nothing to do with us. It's their job, whoever they is. And we were saying, but yes, no, it has to do with you, because why are you educating these young people? What is the purpose of the education that you put in? Why are you doing all this if you're not concerned about the end result? So over time we won that argument, and school could see in year 1 that actually their input, their involvement, their determination to get something happen made a difference for their students and continues to make a difference for their students. So it's a model, and this is really important. This is about putting young people and their families in control. We heard Billy talk about what happens when your child gets to 18 and the legal system. It's the same in England. As parents, we can sometimes lose control. Other times we don't. It depends how you present as a parent as to what happens to you. There's a great deal of discrimination goes on there. But the law is that come 18, it's the state that can take that legal control. We wanted to give young people and their families control over their lives. So it's about families having control, but with the voice of the young person right at the heart of that, and that is really important. It's about a curriculum for citizenship. Talbot School is a special school, and in the past in England, and I won't make any assumptions about what is happening in Scotland, though I suspect it's fairly similar, certainly the history of special education in England has been about caring for young people, not about seeing them as citizens. It's not like we're going to become citizens. When do we become a citizen? We're born as citizens. We have that right to citizenship from birth, and that's no different whatever impairment you've got. So that was a bit of the culture change that we were trying to get in education. These young people are citizens, and as citizens they have entitlements, and as schools, the education system has to help them see that they are citizens and that they're not second-class citizens, that they have a right to a fulfilling life. Clear entitlements, and those entitlements are around health, education and social care. Again, we have silos, and it's really difficult to bring them together. For families, it doesn't matter if the money is coming from health, education or social care. If it's about a life, it's about the resources that are available for the young person, putting them together. For my son, I really didn't care where the money came from. I cared about his life, and I wanted to put all the resources together, whether it was money from the state, and actually we were before individual budgets and direct payments, but we did manage to have an element of personalisation before personalisation was even a word. So I think families have been doing this kind of thing for years, but the state has started to do it, and yet families are very often not told about and don't understand what is coming through from the state. We need expert coordinated support. How many times have we heard that? And how many times is that what families are saying isn't happening? And that's true in Sheffield now, as it was 5 years ago, as it was 10, 20 years ago, and I suspect as it will be in 5 years' time. But we need that. And we need families to know. One of the things that is really difficult for families around this time of leaving school is that very often no one knows what is happening to that young person until after they've left. So they might leave school and there is nothing in place. And that was what we wanted to end. That wasn't right. So as we developed the work, we realised that there were 4 key aspects to actually having a hope. Not saying that we would attain it, but having a hope of attaining a leaving school process that was meaningful to the young person, to the family, and left a young person with the prospect of having a good life, whatever that meant to them. So it was putting families in control. But within that, putting the voice of young people at the centre of that. At the very beginning of this work, Simon was working more on the strategic side of things, so working with health and commissioners, and I was working in school with the young people. And one of our starting points was I was running workshops for young people that were leaving school in that first summer. And I was going into school, working with these kids and saying, what do you want to do when you leave school? They'd never been asked that question before, and that makes me want to cry. These are 19-year-olds with fantastic assets and gifts and qualities that our world badly needs. They'd never been asked that question. School found this really, really hard. And I could pick up the vibes. I would go in, it was every Friday afternoon, I'd go in, and we did all this work, which is, person-centred planning type work, so that the students would have a booklet or a collage or whatever they wanted to make about what they wanted to do when they left school. And these would be young people with very complex impairments. At the end, when I was kind of reviewing it with school, well, how did you find that? What do you think? I knew they hadn't liked me going in. But I pushed them for a response, and they said, actually, Pippa, we think you were being really cruel. So I said, oh, tell me why, because I don't think I was being really cruel, but tell me why. Well, there's nothing out there. So I took that, went away and thought about it, thought I've got to find a way through this. I've got to show this school that they need to join the dots up here. So I went back about a week later and said, can you give us a little bit of funding so we can do some work experience placements with the young people? They'd been doing some work experience, but it was like general, oh, there's a job in Morrison's, they can go down there. It wasn't about what the students wanted to do. So we went back to school, got a little bit of funding and worked with about 6 students in a very person-centred way, in a very student-centred way. What did they want to do? One of the lads had always wanted to work with the police. Since he was a little boy, his mum and dad said that he'd loved the walkie-talkies, he'd always had a policeman's hat, and aged 18, 19, that's what he told us he wanted to do. So it was very simple in the end. The family actually had a friend who worked in the admin in Sheffield Central Police Station headquarters. So we managed to get him a placement there. He was flying. He still goes there 5 years later, he's still there. They said, the people in the police station said, he was the best work experience student they had ever had, bar none, bar the most able that had come from mainstream schools. He got to try out everything, and he blossomed, and school saw how he blossomed, but more importantly, his peers saw how he blossomed. He was coming into school strutting his stuff. They all wanted a shot at whatever it was that made them feel really good about themselves. So they would start, we'd fix up interviews for some of the other students to do whatever they wanted to do, and the girls would come in with their hair all curled that day, their best clothes on. There was a buzz in the school that from receptionist to the, escort, if we start at the escort, to the receptionist as these young students came into school, to the class teacher, to the teaching assistants, to the parents. And it was that, I think they gave us something like £3,000 to do that piece of work, but it was that piece of work that changed the culture, that allowed that just change. And school said, oh, we have to do something about this. We did a presentation to parents, to adult services, to teachers, to education, to health, whoever would come. And we had a disabled man come to lead that. So we had really good role models, and the parents, most importantly, but the professionals as well, saw their sons and daughters with a huge range of communication impairments and styles of communication, that they saw them express something that was aspirational and about them. And actually that changed things, the culture for parents. At the end of that evening, the parents were in tears, saying, I thought we were just going to be sat at home watching telly, but I can see something different now. I can see something different. And those kids, I still see these families. It's not the life that I might want for them, but it is a huge lot better than it was going to be before we did this work. So, voice, voice, voice. Citizenship, voice. Those are the things that are most important. And then, of course, having control of whatever resources the state is going to give, that is really important. And again, expert coordinated support. So, I'm not going to go on too much about this. I've said about citizenship, but that's a culture shift. Seeing young people with whatever impairment they happen to have as citizens that have so much to offer to our world. And, I know from losing my son what I've lost in my own little world. I know what he taught me. I know what he had to give to the world. And he had really complex impairments. So I know inside myself that every single child, every single young person has got something that they can give to the world which will make the world a better place for individuals and bigger than that. So that's what we're talking about. And we're talking about what we've learnt in the work in Sheffield is at the beginning we were very much about services and statutory stuff, and we're now, and it's because of the economic situation no doubt, but it's about community. It's about, yes, we need the budgets, but it's much more than that. We're never going to do this with just money. It's about something bigger and more community based. And that's always a challenge. The other tool, I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but for me this is really important. This is crucial to the culture change. It's seeing, and this is something my son taught me. He had all these very complex impairments, but he had the strongest spirit of anyone I have ever met. And I haven't met a spirit bigger than his. Equal, yes, but not bigger. So, in spite of all his impairments, in spite of all the things that he couldn't do, he had a spirit which shone out. And it shone out however poorly he was, however weak he was, up to his last breath, his spirit was shining out. And as a parent, one of the things that I used to talk about as a young parent was we have our outer experience, but we also need to work really hard for ourselves to make ourselves strong, to keep our spirits strong. So when I'm now doing a lot of work in Sheffield just around that, we have meditation groups for parents, we have relaxation groups, because that is where true empowerment is. If we can feel good inside ourselves and more confident, a bit like Billy Clark was saying there, it's intimidating sitting in these meetings. Well, parents have got to, advocacy services are being slashed. We do a lot of advocacy in Sheffield, but we're doing most of it unpaid. But that's not sustainable. So we need to be helping people feel really good about themselves, who they are, and what they can bring. So we're calling this real wealth. So it's the outer and the inner. And the inner of both our children and our families so often gets forgotten. But that's what can get broken. For families, that anxiety at that point where their son or daughter is leaving school, they're getting older, they maybe have their own health to deal with. I see families, I see parents whose spirits get broken at that point. After all these years, they're exhausted, they've battled. So, looking after spirit, inner resilience, inner well-being is crucial to this model. And that's just a little diagram that really summarises what I've been saying. So you have the young person and their family at the centre. You've got community and school. We figured out that school was the best place to hold the service land of this move from children's world to adult world, this transition, if you like. Because, for many reasons, but because the kids were there and people in school knew these young people. They might not always ask the right question, but with a bit of help we saw that could change and they could ask the right questions. On the whole, families trust the school, or at least there is a relationship there. What we had before was professionals from social care and health going in maybe when from 16 plus, not really knowing the young person, so the young person's voice would get lost, completely lost, because health and social care would speak to the parents but wouldn't have time to spend to get to know a young person with a communication impairment or learning difficulties, so it would be what the parents said. And that's fine and good, but we need to have the voice of young people at the heart of this. So school can do that. School have the voice, and the families are there. And they know the young person as a whole, not just a little part of. So it makes sense. It makes sense. I know there's a huge culture change there. I know it's a challenge. But for the families, for the young people, that's where it makes sense. So, and then it's this bit up the top, that's the statutory sector. That's actually should just drip in rather than take over. It should be helping all this stuff that is going on here, which is about citizenship and community. If you have questions as I go along, I know I just kind of get into this and kind of it just comes out, but if you have questions, just let me know. So, we started from the governors. We started with a transition strategy, which we got together through a consultation with parents, and the young people's voice came through the workshops that I was doing with them at the time. School-based, we were really lucky that in that first year we had a pilot project called Living and Learning Now, which was about individual budgets in education in England. And South Yorkshire were one of the regions to get this pilot money, so we grabbed that, and that allowed us to play with individual budgets in education post-19 when our students left school. And it's still work in progress. 5 years on, as I say, we wouldn't say we've got it right. We've got changing climate. Each year we've got different challenges, and each year we learn new things. How we made it happen was that the school took the lead. We had, in those first 2 years, we had monthly meetings of every single professional involved with every single child, and it was an assistant head at school, and I was really heavily involved at that time. So it was the assistant head and myself led those meetings. We had spreadsheets and tick, tick, tick. Has this assessment been done? Why hasn't it been done? We need that done by this time. We brought together a timeline which all agencies agreed to. We did work around roles and responsibilities so that we could hold individuals accountable for what had or hadn't been done. And we were lucky. We had champions in each of the agencies. We had someone who was really good. So at that time, we've lost this post now, but we had a transition nurse. She made sure that we got the health assessments done on time. She really helped us with, we had individual budgets in health way before other areas were having them. And that was really because of this one person who was pushing it. And there was someone high in health, there was a commissioner in health who was our friend as well. So we looked for our champions and we used them shamelessly. We got the backing of the head and the governors over time. That took us about 18 months, but we got that, and it's now solid. It is now 5 years on. We can say that that is one of the things that is absolutely solid. School are really proud of this work. It's seen as pioneering work in England, and the school is held up as a flagship of good practice. So we won that, and actually, although it was kind of intense at the time, it wasn't that bad, you know. It wasn't. It just needed a lot of time and a lot of energy. And being in the school a lot. It was about building relationships and challenging, and then being very creative. So when we met the block, like, Pippa, you're being cruel, it was going away, thinking about it, and coming back with another solution, another angle, and trying to get in another way. There were some confrontations, but not that many, not that many. And we're always reflecting and evaluating and just trying to keep it going. And we won the battles with, this is the personalisation lead in adult social care. People saw the sense of it. This is the outcome for one young man, and this family is really important. This is the eldest of 3 brothers who have now been 3 boys, all at Talbot school. Jonathan was in the first year. He's a young man with very complex health needs, learning difficulties, communication impairments. Before we started this work, and really this work he was one of the energizers of this work. His mum was going, what is going to happen to Jonathan when he leaves school? She was told that the only place for him to go was an old people's home because of his needs. Over my dead body, she said. Jonathan, and he didn't have to go there. Luckily things came together. But Jonathan's health has improved as a result of what he's been doing since he left school. He was never that keen on going to school. His mum was terrified about him leaving school. His younger brother just left this summer. She wasn't terrified of him leaving school. She couldn't wait for him to leave school because she saw that their lives could be so much better. Her 3 boys now are all benefiting from this work. They have a team of personal assistants. They have their own, but there's a team around them. They still live with mum. They're all going out to do different things. Jonathan was doing things like using power tools. No one had ever gone near him with that before. He actually got a BTEC in woodworking skills. No one, including school, had ever thought that he would be capable of that. So his self-esteem, his skills, he has got a life of meaning and purpose now. And so have his brothers. His mum hopes that she wants them all to stay together. They're very close, these boys. She will one day move out of the house and leave them together in their house with her just down the road, a bit like Billy perhaps. Jonathan started to do things I would never dreamed he could do. Having choice and control has been a positive, life-changing experience for all the family, especially Jonathan. Other students are doing, it's really varied. For the first time 2 years ago, we had 2 students leaving school. They moved straight into their own places that summer. Not into an organisation's home. It wasn't a MenCap home or a provider's home. It was their place with support that they'd chosen. That just shows how high aspirations for families had come in 2 to 3 years. And these were young people with really complex impairments again. 2 of the boys, young men, are living together. And they've got a team of support around them. They're really good friends, these young men. It was the right thing for them to do. Their families are just making it work together. So it's some young people are starting up their own little micro enterprises, so they're earning a bit of money. I'll come on to some of the challenges that we still have, but there's a huge range, more than I could put up in a slide. Challenges still for our students with the most complex impairments. There is this number one challenge: developing meaningful opportunities. We have, there's a dad who rang me up just last week or the week before. His son, chronic health condition, really complex impairments. A life with going out and about with a PA just isn't going to work for him. That's what his family are thinking. There isn't anywhere. We've got really traditional day services in Sheffield. We've got 1 or 2 more imaginative day centres in the voluntary sector, but they're pretty rough and ready, and they're not, this young lad, is not going to meet his needs. So that is a huge challenge for young people and parents. We have the differing needs and wishes of families. Families of disabled children and young people come in all shapes and sizes. We get put into a box, but actually we don't belong in a box. We're citizens of the world, What I would want might be different from what any of you who are parents might want, and that would be different from what someone else would want. So however much we try and get it right, there will always be someone who wants something different, and that's their prerogative. But that's difficult as a school to kind of manage that at times. Funding being released. We had huge headaches with that this last summer. The first few years that wasn't too bad, but as the economic climate has changed, so we didn't have the funding released on time for some of our students last year. So we were back to battling and cajoling and advocating and persuading and all the rest of it. And this, I'm sure you have this in Scotland as well, the different time schedules for each agency leads to delays for families. So in England, many young people move from children's to adults' health at 16, although for those with the most complex impairments, they'll hang on and on and on, but it'll be 18. If they've been involved in social care, that changes at 18. And if you've got a statement, that's at 19. So you've got 3 different timelines there. And actually kind of coordinating this work to bring it all together is extremely challenging. Professionals learning to understand and work within personalisation. We have change of personnel. We've had our champions leave us. So it's like we have to start re-educating, and that seems to be an ongoing process. And particularly with the climate that we've got now, we've got the panel, I hate that word, so that's why I hesitated, but all the support plans of the young people have to go to a panel. That panel has become more and more difficult for us to negotiate and to have representation from families at. So that's becoming more of our problem. And we have no framework for peer support for young people after they've left. When they're at school, they have a really good, they're together all the time. And we've tried to do different bits of work around this, but we still need to do more because they can just get lost in the city and become really isolated. So that's something that we've got our eye on. We've got what we managed to do last year, and again, I don't know quite what the system is in Scotland, but we managed to pull down again money for young people who weren't able to access our local colleges, and those are the young people with the most complex impairments. Local colleges are not fit for purpose, either the physical environment, but certainly not the curriculum or the sensory environment, and they might exclude some of our students. But we managed to pull down last year for 6 students a reasonable sized individual education budget, which we layered on top of their health and social care. So they had really good education input. We employed a teacher or a tutor who went out and made sure that wherever they were, whatever they were doing, there was an education programme. Because what we've found is that young people are losing skills without the education input. And that's pretty much it. We would never ever go back. This work has been transformational in the city. It's been transformational for the young people and the families. There is still a challenge there. I think there will forever be a challenge. What we've learnt through doing it is that actually, again, I'm going to finish where I started, is that you can't just isolate this work and say it's about transition. This is about, for families, we need to have higher expectations right the way through. We can't be saying something at birth and, we'll look after them, don't you worry, there's plenty of things out there, we'll look after them. And then at 18, 19 say, actually there's not very much there, and by the way, we've got the power now. So it's something about, it's a whole life journey, and transitions needs to be seen within that context. There's another paper that's up on the Centre for Welfare Reform website called A Fair Start, and that looks at from birth up to old age. And of course, this bit that we're talking about is just in the middle of that. I should have put a reference up there. It was some work that Simon and I did with the University of Birmingham. I think I'll stop there. My name is Pippa Murray. I'm here from IBK Initiatives and the Centre for Welfare Reform. And I'm here this morning to talk about some work that I've been doing with the Centre, with Simon Duffy from the Centre for Welfare Reform in Sheffield, with families in Sheffield. Just to tell you a little bit about myself, so you know that where I'm coming from, IBK stands for Inspired by Kim. Kim was my son, who had very complex impairments and who sadly I lost at the age of 15. He was nearly 16. And that was nearly 15 years ago. It seems like past life now, unfortunately. But